I have worked with executives, guys who have built massive companies, who have built great careers for themselves. And they all say before we start that they lack willpower. That's why they struggle to get in shape or whatever it may be. Yet they've all managed to get in shape. And I want to spend this video showing you that you can do the same thing, but also what is willpower and talking to you about what I think it is and what you should focus on, right? Because can you tell me what willpower is? There have been two big studies when it comes to willpower. Baumeister was the first big study when it comes to willpower. Okay, it was done in 1998 and it was called the radish experiment. Okay, so essentially what they did is they had a room and a table and they had two plates. One plate had radishes on, the other plate had cookies. Okay, so they got a group of people, separated them. One group were told, go into the room and resist the cookies and eat the radishes, while the other group were told, go into the room, resist the radishes, which I imagine was pretty easy, and consume the cookies, right? Once that happened, they were then took into a room and told to complete an impossible puzzle, right? And essentially what happened was the cookie group attempted the puzzle for longer, right? So they concluded that blood glucose had essentially provided like a battery for your willpower, okay? And that's how they described it, as a battery or fuel, okay? So when you were lacking willpower, they essentially just said, have a sugary drink, which I mean would be great if it was the case. And then there was another one in 2024, which is a follow-up study by Sperber, I think you pronounce it. And essentially they did theirs with children though, and it was a marshmallow test, okay? Kind of similar, different results, right? But they both could not provide the same answer. There is a little bit of a narrative when it comes to willpower though, and it provides us with a little bit of a crutch, right? It actually kind of flatters us at times because it essentially is saying that success is a choice that we just have to keep making. But it has two failure modes that wrecks guys when it comes to getting in shape, right? Because every slip is framed as a moral failure. You skip the gym, you ate the pizza, you lack willpower. That's what you will tell yourself, right? Is every time that happens, a story builds and builds and builds. But on the other side, it hides what successful guys do when it comes to getting in shape, right? Because you don't see the 8 hours sleep he gets every night. You don't see the fact that he doesn't keep junk food in the house. You don't see the fact that he gets his clothes ready every single night and puts them by the door, right? But in reality, he just has willpower. That's what people will say. Now, I think willpower comes down to three things, right? Your habits, your environment, and a little bit of mental energy. Now, I say this is because when I look back on my journey, I have been through different friendship groups, I have been in different environments, right? And I have introduced new habits. And every time I go into a more positive environment or I'm around the people who are where I want to be, right? It makes it easier for me. So for instance, when I was doing the marathon, I spent more time talking to runners than bodybuilders, right? Because they're doing what I'm doing. They're running at speeds that I want to run. They're doing the same kind of training plan. So you have this kind of built-in system inside you that, okay, well, I'm talking about this a lot, right? I'm going to go do it, okay? So you build that environment around you. Now, a quote that I seen whilst looking for this video through a lot of the data and the studies was, someone said, willpower is the energy you spend trying to override habits, which is very true, right? Because if you are trying to snack less, right, which is a habit, okay, but that's what people will class as willpower because you're saying no to something, right? Now, if you're trying to change that or change what you snack on, it requires energy to change that. But then it essentially solidifies as a habit later down the line. That's why I say that habit, environment, and a little bit of mental energy is what willpower consists of. Now in 2015, there was a meta-analysis done by Gala and Duckworth, right? And essentially what it was is they asked, why do high self-control people succeed, right? So essentially through 6 studies and 2,500 odd people, they found that people were not successful because they resisted temptation harder, but because they built the habits, right? They removed the need of the inhibition to complete bad habit or to complete more positive habit. Now, this is where habits begin to get highlighted a bit more, right? And if you have read anything by James Clear, you will know a little bit more about habits than most people, right? Because he is the habit man, I guess you could say, right? But he essentially breaks down what a habit is. Habit is 3 things. It is a cue, it is a routine, it is a reward, all right? So for example, a habit could be making your morning coffee. The cue could be walking into the kitchen. The routine is pressing on the coffee machine and pressing what coffee you want. And the reward is drinking a nice coffee and getting caffeinated. Now, something you want to do, especially when creating good habits, right, is make them easy and make them really rewarding. Because the more you can do that, the more you'll want to repeat them, right? That's why we do things, is because we get into this cycle of, okay, I feel good when I do that, or there's a positive outcome when I do that, or whatever it may be that's positive towards where you're going, right? But then on the flip side is maybe you have a habit right now that you deem as bad, or there's a bit of a negative habit in your life. Make that really, really hard to do. So if you come home and the first thing you do is go into the snack cupboard, right? And all of a sudden you think, oh, I've got no willpower. It's not that. What you need to do is take those things out of the cupboard, right? Remove them from your environment. Remove the habit. The habit might still be there. You might go into the cupboard, but the things aren't in there. So you have cut that cycle. You've broke it, okay? So again, make them hard to do. One thing that James Clear says is, you do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems, right? Essentially, you don't need more willpower, but instead leverage these areas. First one is sleep, and I will shout about this till I have no breath left, right? Because if you are sleeping less than 6 hours, you might think you're okay, but honestly, you really aren't, right? In 2021, there was a meta-analysis done, and it shows that insufficient sleep impairs self-control across multiple domains, whether that's training, whether that's diet, whether that's mood, or also making decisions, right? And sticking to your habits. If you are sleeping less than 6 hours, I urge you to improve that. And honestly, you will see massive change just from doing that. Second is kitchen environment. Now, that might sound silly, but I kind of touched upon it before, right? Now, we spoke about environment and how important that is and how that is a portion of what willpower makes up or is made up of, right? If you are walking into your kitchen and there is junk food or things that you know aren't going to be the best for you, then you're more likely to eat it, right? Because let's be honest, if you're in your kitchen or when you go in your kitchen, whatever is around you, you are going to eat for dinner, right? So if you have good things in the house, you're going to eat good. If you have crap in the house, you're going to eat crap, right? So it sounds super simple, and it is. If you clean up your kitchen environment, or even just you can generalize to say eating environment, you're going to make better decisions, have better habits, you also have a better environment, and you also don't need to use as much mental capacity to say no to those things. Number 3 is similar, right? It is remove friction. Now, you will always say, I don't have the willpower to say no, or I don't have the willpower to go to the gym after work, or whatever it may be, right? But we spoke about this now, it's the habit. So put your gym bag in the car, right? Get your food ready for the night before, whether you might even go, okay, right, I have a client dinner. So you decide on what you're having on the menu before you go. Remove friction. Like I said before, and like one of the 3 things that makes up kind of willpower is mental energy. If you can give yourself as much mental energy going into the next day, you're going to make far better decisions and not have to use willpower to get through your day. Number 4 is identity and social environment. The people you spend time with. This could be friends, it could be your training partner, it could be your community, it could even be your colleagues. Now, in 2007, Christakis and Fowler did a study showing that obesity, smoking, and behavior spread through social networks. So this is why having a good social network is so important. If you have people who just drink and smoke and eat crap and do all these things, you are also going to do those things, right? And I'm sure you've experienced this in your life. That's why having a good group around you is so important. Number 5 is your schedule. If you can get your schedule in line, because habits form from consistency, right? Not from the level of how you feel, aka motivation or willpower, right? In 2010, Lally did a study and it showed that a habit is formed roughly on 66 days or in 66 days, regardless of your motivation level. So if you can, and I know sometimes it's a bit hard, but if you can eat at the same time, train at the same time, in the same place, everything is so routine that you have to not think about it as much. And again, thinking about number 3, remove friction. It's going to be so much easier to implement that habit. But let's look at the other side, because surely power matters, right? People speak about it all the time. And in a small degree, yes, and small burst, you have to have it. But it's the choices, right? That's when you need willpower. You need to make a choice. And this is where I say the mental energy comes in, is because there are going to be times where you might not have a habit in place, or you're out at a meal and you want to have that dessert. But having the willpower to say no is essentially having the choice, or making the choice to say no. So you need to have that in line. Yes, I am not saying that once you put habits in place, you're on autopilot, right? We might want to get there, but there are going to be times that you are going to have to make choices. And that's where you will use willpower, or these small, kind of conscious efforts, right? Because what you've got to remember is willpower is the energy to override habits. Okay. So people often think that it's their behavior or whatever it is, but we want to make it automatic and cued by your environment. The more we can do that, the less you have to think and the less willpower you need, right? So remember, next time you think you lack willpower, it's actually the habits you need to implement.